Hello, good morning, fellows. Good morning, Prof, and good morning, the T's on the call. I'm happy that you guys join us as well. It's another Saturday morning, and we'll continue our training program. This morning, we'll be looking at research ethics and research integrity, and Prof will be taking us on this. After the training session, we have a few comments and instructions to give. Do have a lovely and impactful engagement with Prof. Prof, over to you, ma.
Thank you very much, Kudus. Good morning, everyone. Thanks to all fellows here on the call. I would assume everybody is here. Please encourage yourselves to be here 5 minutes before time. Um, it's ethical to keep to time. And thanks for the research assistants and mentors that are on the program. Today, we're looking at ethics, and it's very important that we look at ethics at the very beginning of our learnings about research, because understanding the value of ethics would improve the quality of the research you do. One of the things you're going to see with ethics is the distinction between it and law. Ethics is dependent on you making the choice to do the right thing. Because when you do the wrong thing, nothing can pick you up and discipline you, like the way the law will do, except you cross the boundaries and infringe on the right of another person. So ethics is more around morality, you understanding why and be part of the community that decides to do good, or you choose to be amongst the community that does bad. It's a self-guiding process. And for anyone that wants to be part of that research community, which I always refer to as an elite community, it's a choice, not because there's any policeman guarding you, not because there's any um, teacher going to fail you. It's a choice to do the right thing. And that's why researchers are highly respected, because they have this um, clout around them that makes them choose to do what is right. You can't be unethical and be a good researcher. And you'll see the many points where you could fail on that route if you do not learn about the moralities and choose to be governed by the moralities that governs the community of researchers. So I'll just want today to first talk about what research is. It's very important for you to know what research is and why you're doing research. I want to appreciate that as undergraduate medical and dental students, a number of you might choose to do research because it looks good on your CV and it increases your chances of jackpot. I'm aware that might be a reason for some. And for many of your senior colleagues, like myself or early career researchers, the reason why they do research might be to get the papers on their CV so that they can get their promotions on time. However, you have to know what research is and why, and be better positioned to address research the way it is. Those two things I've talked about that you might be looking for, or other researchers in the academic industry might be looking for, should become secondary when you understand the context of research. And what is research? I know this definition is 24 years old, but it's the simplest and most direct way to be able to describe what research is. That first is a systematic to a deliberate process to investigate, um, just a minute, please, to, of an investigation designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. And I highlighted three critical things there. One is systematic. You follow the rules that govern research. That's what makes it systematic. It can be evaluated. It is transparent. People can look through it. And then there's a documentation to it that allows for references. There's a thinking that goes through it to allow for credibility. It's systematic. You don't just wake up and say, "Oh, I want to investigate if the hairs of men is longer than why men's hair are short and the women's hair are long." And then you go into the field and collect it. No, there's a whole process that governs that. There's a whole process, and you see it in the slides that I've sent to you. Please study that slide because that slide is what is going to inform your assignment. This is an abridged. If you look at that slide, it's about 53 slides. This is an abridged version. Okay. 2 is a deliberate. You don't do research by accident. There are findings that can happen by accident. There are findings that might come out from your research by accident. Or you choose to investigate. And that's why you must have research questions. There are questions you ask, and the way those questions are asked. And there are systems that helps you address that question you ask. And even in research, the kind of questions you ask are categorized. It might be that you want to confirm an existing knowledge based on changes in the field. For example, is what you knew before COVID about an issue still the same after COVID, knowing that COVID changed almost everything in the world? Those, during this 2 time period, are things still the same? Or you might look at a woman, is our blood pressure or our physiological parameters the same after she had had 2 children, after she had had 5 children? Or is the physiological parameter of the adolescents the same after they have become elderly? You want to look for, an understanding. And of course, there's always a place to create new knowledge that doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. So you want to generate the answer to something that doesn't exist. I'm sure when they were flying the plane, the first plane that ever flew, it was answering a question that never existed. The first satellite in the moon, the first satellite in space, was answering the question that never existed. But since then, others have built on that. And the third thing is the generalizability. Of course, there's space for precision medicine, which is personalized. The medicine for one person may not be the same medicine for another person. But usually in research, we do things in a way that it can be generalized to the cohort of people that that study represents. For example, when you do an online survey, you can never, ever generalize an online survey to, okay, let's say I did an online survey among students in Nigeria. That study can never be generalized to students in Nigeria because an online survey is a convenient sample. It is only accessible but to those that you have their addresses. There's no place in this world that you're going to go and say, oh, I dropped this research question here, so everybody can have access to it. No, it's only your cohort, the people that know you, the people that are linked to you, that has that access to that survey. And then 3, it's only people that are rich that will have access to that survey because it's only them that will have internet, it's only them that will have smartphone. So therefore, the knowledge you generalize and generate from a cohort, from an online survey, can only be generalized to those people, the rich people. It can never be generalized to students per se. So understanding all the systems that go in research allows for the credibility of what you want to do. And I'll explain why we're talking about credibility. So it's a planned process to collect information in a given subject of interest. And once you do it, you're going to generate a generalizable knowledge and or a gap that already exists in knowledge before you conducted the research. Before I talk about the stages of research, I think there was something I wanted to talk about. Or if I remember. So when you say you're going to do research, once again, it's a deliberate thing. You think about it, you develop a research plan, which is written, anybody can pick it up and replicate it. That's why it's called a proposal. Please, when you are asked to develop a proposal, give time to it. You don't develop a proposal the night before you want to submit your application to ethics committee. You would have developed it, gone back and forth so that all the contents that makes it systematic, that makes it follows the rules that we'll be talking about today as addressed before you send it to ethics approval. Please never start a research before you get your ethics clearance. You're submitting it to an ethics committee. Allow somebody independent of you that is not biased by your study to look at it and give comments to ensure the scientific validity and ethical integrity of that study. It is a compulsory thing for any research involving humans, dead or alive, direct or indirect, that you must submit your protocol to ethics committees and get an approval. We won't go through the reason why for this shortly. It is only after that you never start collecting data before you have gotten an approval. After you've gotten your approval, you go into the field or the lab or wherever it is that you ought to implement and collect your data. When you collect your data, you analyze and interpret, and then you write your report, either as a dissertation or a project or a manuscript. And then you disseminate it. You disseminate it by publishing it. You disseminate it by going to workshops. You disseminate it by going to conferences. You disseminate it by also writing blogs. It's very important for you to identify where is the appropriate place to disseminate your research results. You would note as you go through this process that when you are working on manuscript writing, it means that you want to disseminate your results by publication. Okay, please just a minute. You want to disseminate your reports by publication. That's what it means. There are credible places where you disseminate your results. And this takes me to the point I wanted to raise. Why do you do research? You do research to primarily generate knowledge that addresses a gap. And when you do that, your research should contribute to national development and growth. Read my lips. The primary purpose for you doing your research is to contribute to national development and growth. And that's a success story of China today. That it is the research they've done that has contributed to the growth of the country. It's the same success story with India today. It's the same success story with Malaysia. It's a growing enterprise. And it was the same success story that got US and the high-income countries, Scandinavians, to where they are today. For me, my best story is the Scandinavians, where you really find poor people. They know the power of translating research results into development, policies and programs that influences the practice of the country at the macro level, at the meso level, at the micro level. Micro is at household, meso is at community, macro is at the national, because they can translate the result of their research into policies and practices that affects the life of people. This is what drives national growth and development. And this is why you are students in the university. The university was established by statutes that says that whatever you're doing there, including your researchers, your teachers, is to inform national development and growth. You should be addressing how things can be done better. And of course, in doing that, then your secondary goal becomes achieved. You will get your promotion, you will get your papers in your CV. And if you want to japa with that CV, you can, but it cannot be the primary purpose of research. Therefore, understanding the primary purpose of research, which is about national development and growth, will help you understand why you have to do science properly and ethics appropriately. Today, we'll be looking at the ethics. At subsequent times, you look at all the components of science that ensure science integrity, science validity. And today, we're learning about ethics integrity. Why does this matter? Research is seeking for truth. Research is not seeking for your data. Research is not seeking for your p-value is significant. No. The research is searching for truth because there's truth somewhere there. We don't get to the truth overnight and do an eureka at the first attempt of research. Every single research that is done globally creates a stepping stone for the next. Find something, all right, all right. We pull it together and move to the next. That's why you must disseminate. Ethically, you must disseminate the results. It's an ethical imperative that when you do a research, you must disseminate the results. Because when you do not disseminate, it creates a gap in knowledge in the space, and people will assume it hasn't been done. And then they'll waste the limited resources, be it human capital, as well as, equipment, the three E's. They'll waste the resources and do it again, which not only waste resources, but it's also waste time because you've done it, we know an answer, but you did not disseminate it. Then we spend another time developing it. Truth matters. Truth, if you don't know the truth, you know how many people continues to die until truth is known. You know how many people continues to die from cancer because we still don't know one truth about preventing this particular cancer or one truth about treating this cancer. So we don't want delay. You must disseminate results, whatever the result is. And the results must be telling the truth. It's not looking for your p-value so that your paper looks interesting and, on the right side for you. It's not about shifting things around. It's about looking for the truth, disseminating so that we can find a stepping stone. And in time, somebody can build on that. If you disseminate wrong things, we'll be building on wrong. And there are many people that have done that. I've read about histories of unethical practices, and we'll talk about many times, but the worst is for you to be changing results. One that touched my life was the story of this guy who was always doing very small clinical trials, very small. He would do 35, 40, so that people don't really pick him. And he was sending out publications, studies he never did. He sat in his room, studies he never did, and was sending out results of clinical trial that was suggesting that the use of colloid expanders as alternative to transfusion would save lives in theater. You know what happens with the results that you disseminate? Organizations like WHO now harnesses those information, do systematic reviews, umbrella reviews. Believe me, that's what they do. And they put out calls and ask people to apply to be able to do this, and they give them money. That's how they develop policies. So you harness this information, and then you pull it together, and based on your systematic reviews or umbrella reviews, the WHO use that data to inform policies that is in fact affecting lives. So that's another thing that you must note. If you do very important work, please don't go to predator journals because nobody is going to touch predator journals. Predator journals are dangerous, very dangerous. Please ask me why if I don't answer it as I go. All right. So they harnessed his information, and there was global recommendation to use colloid expanders rather than blood transfusions when you were in the theater. This was national policy. This was global policy. This was global practice for surgery. And do you know what happened? People were dying. People were dying because colloid expanders was not actually doing what it was supposed to do. I'm talking about real life. I'm not talking about fake. Until one day, I'll tell you what the one day, of course, surgeons were also seeing on their practice that these things wasn't working. But you know how we all are. We are medical practitioners. You discover very important things. But because you don't know how to write manuscripts, you do it as your practice under your corner. And it's not good. Until one day, and what was that one day? Of course, he writes it very well, and the reviewers passed it. The editor now read the paper, and he said this was an unusual practice where you get perfect results. You can imagine how many results will be created now with AI. That was in the days when there was no AI. Oh. He just read through that paper, but he didn't suspect anything fishy. He just said, this is perfect results. It's unusual to get perfect results in clinical trial. That's why you must go, take another point from me, you do send me to audit. Why you must go to credible journals. And then he now wrote to the author to please share results. Please tell me why I must talk about that. That look, he should look again at his result. Maybe there's something. He didn't get a reply. He wrote him the second time, he didn't get the reply. He wrote him the third time, he didn't get the reply. Then he wrote to his institution. He wrote to his institution. The institution now investigated. Lo and behold, he was generating data under his table. Geez, generating data that affects the global practice. What then happened was that all these papers have to be retracted. When they now did systematic reviews, well, meta-analysis with these papers, they now found that colored expanders were killing people. My people, everything you do must be based on truth. That's the ethics. The thing about this is that it's completely ethics. Did the man go to jail? He didn't go to jail because ethics is not law. Of course, he will lose his license. The school will not take him. The whole world knows he has done something bad morally. Nobody is going to pick him, but he was not going to go to jail because it's about morals and a choice by you to keep it. I asked you to go three things, and I'm going to ask anybody there to remind me, MWH001, if you are 001, remind me of one of the things I said you should hold for me. There were three things. I asked Kudus to hold one and I said hold two. 001, do you want to remind me of what I asked you to hold? Please, can somebody unmute 001? Is the Kudus, is 001 there?
Yes, I'm trying to give him permission to unmute.
Okay.
Okay. You can unmute now.
Okay, thank you very much. So you told us to hold three things, which is that it is a systematic process, then it is deliberate, and it has to
No,
contribute
no,
to.
those are not the, no, I didn't ask. Those ones I told you, I didn't ask you to hold it. There were three things I wanted you to hold. 002, is there any other thing that you remember I said hold? Those ones I taught you, you should know. There were three things I said you should hold. One I said Kudus you hold, and the other two I told you to hold for me. Okay. I'm sure
Yeah.
nobody will just
Okay, unmute. The issue is they can't unmute themselves. I'm trying. Okay, all seven is raising hand.
excellent. 007, I'm listening.
I've allowed you to
Thank you,
unmute.
ma. All right, thank
Yes,
you, ma. I think you told us to ask why predator journals are dangerous.
very
I think
good.
that's one of the things that you said we should ask. And then you
Excellent.
said we should ask why the editor asked the man to send results from
Okay.
from his work.
Yes,
Those are the
excellent.
two.
That was too excellent. So let me answer those two. Excellent, and thanks for remembering. 014, just hold on. Let me answer this. You must never go to predator journals. Why? Why is it dangerous? Remember that before you go to do your research, the ethics committee review your manuscript, your protocol. The ethics committee review before you go, so as to ensure the scientific validity and ethical integrity. All the rules that governs the science of the research, they would have looked at it and be sure that you've applied it. All the rules that governs the ethics, they would have ensured you look at it before you go and do it. If you have done it and you now submit to the journal, a whole set of people with expertise now review it, so that what you have done also has scientific validity and ethical integrity. And where there are gaps, they will give their comments to guide you and support you in a way that the final manuscript that you produce will be such that is credible to inform policies and practices in Nigeria, in Africa, in West Africa, or in the world. So, and yes, that was number three. I wanted to ask you, that I asked you to hold for me. And in these places, when you go to Q1, Q2 journals, which is why we are training you, we're not training you to just produce manuscripts, we're training you to go to the topmost journal in the world. When you go to those journals, it is experts. It is experts that review manuscripts, not Kodo or just anybody. It is experts, people that are authority in their field. So that when you publish a manuscript in a Q1 journal, anybody in the world will trust it. WHO will pick it. UNICEF will pick it because they know it has gone through expert review. If you go and publish in a journal that has no indexing and anything, nobody's going to touch it and harvest it as part of the evidence to inform a practice. These two reasons are why you must avoid predator journals. One, a predator journal, they don't do review. They don't. Or if they do at all, it's wishy-washy. They don't look for experts. For example, a predator journal comes to me, I'm not going to touch it. I'm not even going to touch it to review. I don't have the time. People don't touch. Credible people don't go to predator journals. Credible people don't publish in predator journals. Don't let your name be associated with predator journals because you lose credibility. Predator journals are journals that are just looking for money. They don't go through the rigors of science, and therefore they're not contributing to building nations and the world. They're only looking for the money that you have said selling as APC. So this are reasons why you must avoid predator journals. And these are reasons why you must aim. You're not only avoiding predator journals, you must aim for credible journals, Q1, Q2 journals. At the least, you must publish in a journal that is indexed in Scopus because the journals themselves are also audited. They are audited and show that they are doing what is credible. If they are not audited, if they are not doing the right things, they are delisted. So you can't just go and publish in anything. You can't do good work and go and publish in any place. Of course, you can do bad work and be publishing. You're spending 24 weeks here to learn how to do valid science and ensure ethical integrity in what you do so that what you publish will contribute to national development and growth. I'm spending a lot more time here. I don't know why, but it's very important also to understand why we started this process. We started this manuscript up in 2023, born out of a vision, which we hope will share with us. And what's that vision? When there is no publication, credible publication in the public space about Nigeria, global policy makers will have to use proxy data to tell the story for Nigeria. And I can tell you this because I have been involved in developing national policies. I've been involved in developing national oral health policies, the normal policy, the current national oral health policy. I've been involved in developing HIV-related policies. I've been involved in developing policies. One of the biggest problem I had with my last policy document I developed was for Nigeria was that there was no evidence from Nigeria to take the decisions that needed to be taken. And so what happens in the absence of data from Nigeria to tell the story, the context-specific stories of Nigeria, you'll use proxy data. And where do proxy data come from in Africa? Egypt and South Africa. So you'll be using the story of Egypt to tell the story of Nigeria, to plan for Nigeria. You use the story of South Africa to plan for Nigeria. Of course, you will fail. Of course, those policies will not work. Of course, those practices will not work because they're different contexts. But in the absence of publications telling the stories of Nigeria, they're going to use proxies. And it's going to affect resource distribution at the global level. Therefore, it becomes imperative for you to learn how to publish well, publish in the places where they are, and publish and continue to publish. This is no time in life where you generate evidence and write it in a thesis, bind it in blue and white, and put it under the table. Nigeria has information gap, and therefore our policies and practices are not working because we're using proxy data. So you must understand why these things matter. No, you can't just go to predator journals. Please, I beg you. Don't be found there. Never be associated. And then don't let me be associated with you. If you publish in predator journals, I will just associate with you. I won't know you because it affects your integrity. It affects your integrity. All right, let's see how we can rush in the next 20 minutes. You have the slides and you can do this. So what is research? Research basically, in the basic course, is about right and wrong. Right and wrong as defined by a collective of a community. It's about morals. So the research community says together, we have decided this is right or wrong. You adhere to it. That's it. It's about principles, honesty, right, fairness, responsibilities, honor, integrity that we choose to adhere to as a community. It is when you infringe on the right of somebody else that the law comes in. But ethics is about morals. Unfortunately, in a century where moral decadence is high, where there's explanation for all forms of wrong, this then becomes challenging. Okay. So I'm sorry, I need to keep moving these things. Apologies. So when we talk about ethics, simply defined as what is good and bad, and it's the determination of what is right from what is wrong by conceiving, conducting, and reporting research. Every single phase of that conceiving, conducting, reporting must be informed by the moral values, addressing science and addressing ethics. It's the determination of boundaries of what is acceptable conduct of research, set by rules and regulations in the industry that you have to comply with, and what is ethically acceptable. And what you will see in the stories will tell you now, very briefly, and I'm going to rush through them, is that historically, the abuse of the freedom, of the dependency on you to be morally right has led to the development of rules and regulation. People abuse the space of morality. People abuse research participants, and therefore rules and regulations have to be set to guide. One of the most horrible stories, you would see a history in the slides I've shared with you. Please go through it. I'm coming to the Nazi, which is popular. In the days of the Nazi trial, which was during the World War II, when a lot of Jews were taken as captives, they said, okay, rather than these people dying, remember that's still human being. Rather than these people dying, let's use them to generate evidence. So two things. Somebody is going to hold something for me, M014, and another person, please hold that two things. I use the word use. I have to explain what that means, use, okay? And the second thing is, all right, I'll remember again. So, so the side, okay, rather than them dying, let's use them. Let's use them. I said something before that. Yes, human beings. That's the second one. Somebody should remember that I said something about human beings. So they now used them and decided, the freezing experiment. How long does it take people to die if they're put in cold water? How long do people have to die after parachuting them into cold water? How long does it take people to die if you feed them with salt water? How long will people take to die if you keep them outside in ice, under the snow, and they do not wear their clothes? How long would you take them to die if you spray freezing water on them? Now, at least they would have died. They would have died anyway. They are going to be killed. But rather than killing them, let's use this experiment to kill them, and then we'll have information. There was no attempt to relieve their pains. Oh, there were terrible things. This is just one. There were things like you shoot them, they receive gunshot injuries, and say, oh, what kind of sutures would be most appropriate? Or how, when you have gunshot injuries, how does the femur fracture? What are the fracture? Terrible things, and they didn't have pain. They didn't. There was nothing relieving their pain. Why was this horrible? So, M014, what did I ask you to remind me? Why was this horrible?
Good morning, ma. You asked to remind you about why they used people rather than letting them die.
Okay,
Why
all
the
right.
Nazis?
Yeah. So this is one lesson you must learn in life. You never use people. You don't use people. You don't use people. You don't use people. You work in collaboration with people. As a researcher, you're not superior to anybody. You are in a place of privilege to generate answers because of your skill. But it is for us as a community. Nobody is inferior to you because of your skills. And because we don't use people, one of the things that governs research is the collective decision to generate evidence. You generate evidence collectively. You can't work on your own and say you're a researcher and you're working on your own. No, you must work as a team. I don't think Kudus taught you on the team science. You must find time to teach you on team science. You must work as a team. You're in the best of your brilliance. You can't know everything. You must work as a team so that you can get the best out of that your research for the goodness and the wellness of the people you're working with. You must work with the community you want to do the work with so that you can understand their concept and be able to give back to the community because you do not understand them. You are a different class from people in the community. So you must work collaboratively with the community to identify what it is that they want to ask as a research question about its application of the study procedure so that the result is useful for that community at the end of the day. You don't use people. You work collaboratively with people. Once you become a senior person, you don't use your students. When you have become a doctor, you don't use your patients. You must work with them to answer a question that is relevant for their life. When you are pursuing your JAPA syndrome, when you are pursuing your promotion, you will use people. You will fall into that. And this was the same problem that the Nazi doctors fell into. Why? They needed this evidence so that once the war crime is over, they can then position themselves for offices, the chief medical director. They needed to gather those papers so that they're in a position in future after the war to get the most juicy places. They forgot human beings. That's the second thing. They forgot that the people they're working with are, first of all, human beings before they become experimental subjects. Please note that the people you work with in research are first human beings before they are black or white. They're first human beings before they are sex workers and people living with HIV. They are first human beings before they are Nigerians and Americans. They are first human beings before they are anything else. And it is that human beings that ethics respects. And it's that human beings you must see. They're first human beings before they're any other thing or Christians or Muslims. They're first human beings before they are Yoruba and Igbo. It is the human beings in them that you relate with and you must respect and not do anything otherwise to harm them or harm anyone. I hope you understand that very well. Once you understand that they are human beings first, you will respect every law guiding ethics, every issues raised, concepts, notions that guides the validity of science, because you will respect people, and in respecting that, you generate information that is relevant to their lives, that will improve their lives. These are part of the horrible things that happened: gunshot injuries, wounds being inflicted in people, gunshot stabbing, and then you want to know the appropriate treatment techniques. They were terrible things. People were amputated. People were exposed to chemical and biological agents just to know things. And you'll see a lot. Of course, this is one of my favorite stories. The people that did these things who are there, are they devils with 10 horns? No, they are medical doctors. That's why you are here. They were people like you, medical doctors that took the Hippocratic oath not to harm anybody. They were people like you. Of course, 20 of them were tried, 15 were found guilty, 7 were sentenced to death. And because of the evil, which was a climax, what happened at Nazi did not happen overnight. It was a climax. Go see the history. It started in the days of yellow fever when they wanted to find the cause of yellow fever and the treatment of yellow fever, when they started using people. And it climaxed until the Nazi trial. It was small by small, small by small. It started small by small. And that's the thing that also happens with you. You will see what you also do in our practice. So that Nazi experiment led to the Nuremberg Code, one of which is that you cannot do a study without getting consent from the participant after full disclosure, and you can't do research without getting ethics clearance. Okay, so that's it. So the Nuremberg Code talks about voluntary consent. Every study participant will get consent. Please get consent. Don't use your authority as medical doctors to just recruit your participants. No, And it also becomes voluntary because even if you are a doctor and you're saying, I am collecting consent from you in Nigeria, from your patient in Nigeria, the patient thinks of you as superior. They would not say no because they feel that if they don't give you consent, it might affect their treatment. In high-income countries, of course, they can look you in the face. Your student can look the lecturer in the face. But here, as a lecturer, I come into the room and I tell my students to fill my form and I'm staying there. They won't say no. It's not voluntary consent. That one is induced consent. So the big deal is voluntary consent. It must be conducted by, the study must be conducted by competent persons. I know you guys are rushing and you want to do things. At times I see many of the things you students are doing that there's no competency to even conceptualize the study. And therefore, the outcomes are usually shoddy. Once again, it's not about accumulating paper. One paper can make you for life. And you can write 1,000 paper and you have no value in the industry. Do what is right. It's your duty and responsibility to ensure quality consent and ensure that participants can withdraw. Okay, and you must assure that the code, So what did they do? There's also the Tuskegee Act. This is another thing that you must note. What you would see with the history is that despite the regulations, brethren, despite the Nuremberg Code, people were still doing horrible things. And that example is the Tuskegee and the Guatemala. You will see the Guatemala later. And you would see that it can happen with any caliber of people. The horror of the Tuskegee trial, wherein you had 300 African American men that were recruited that had syphilis. At the time they were recruited, there was no treatment for syphilis. So they were looking for the history of syphilis, the history of the cause of syphilis. When penicillin came, rather than give them penicillin, they denied them penicillin because they still wanted to find out the natural history of syphilis. The second thing was that they were deceived into the research by saying, oh, we want to treat bad blood. You don't deceive people because of your research. You don't tell the fine story about your research because you want to recruit them. They were only exposed. When penicillin came, they didn't have access to it. They made sure that all around them, the hospitals that could otherwise treat them do not give them treatment. Let me tell you the third thing that is worse, and I'm telling you because of you. The person that was used to recruit them was their own people, a Black woman who was a nurse, respected. When bad things want to happen, they will come to you because you're a gatekeeper, and they will ask you to be recruiting the people of your community. That is what happens in low middle income countries. It is you, because of $200, because of $2,000, your eyes are greed for money. You're not in dollar in your life. This one, you're going to be $2,000 every month for the next 3 years. And then they come and you take it. And then you become the gateway for bad research. There are many examples. Like I said, the nurses, they are doctors that took Hippocratic Code. This Tuskegee trial continued after the Nuremberg Code. And then it's the people amongst them that was used to open the doors. It was a journalist that exposed their horrors in 1972. And Clinton had to apologize publicly because these people were treated for 40 years. Some came down with a lot of mortality and many died in that process. That's the picture of a white man. And that's so today it affects the history of research in the US. Black people don't engage in research because they don't trust the system. It's the whites always collecting from the Blacks. And that was an apology by Clinton. Okay, and then another code, the Belmont Code, had to be developed, guys, because they had to build on abuse. There are 3 things. I'm going to rush through what is next now. 3 things: respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. And this principles leads to today. When we talk about respect for people, it means that you must treat people as autonomous agents who have the right to self-determination. You must not coerce them into research. When there's research, you must let them know there's research. And as medical doctors, there's a distinction between research and treatment. You must never mix the two up with them. When you're treating them, you're treating them. When you're wanting them to participate in your research, you must let them know and do everything that is right about it. Ensure that they can say yes to participate or no by allowing them to consent to the process. Consenting means that the competent person who is who is invited to participate in research, take a voluntary decision to participate after you have provided adequate information in a language that he or she understands. Don't speak English to a Yoruba person and say you have collected consent. You must explain your research to this person using information in a way that that person understands. The key word is understand. If it takes you to court and says he does not understand, you will go to jail. And then it must be a competent person that can take that decision. That means you cannot be saying you're doing research to a 5-year-old child and say it's competent enough to take a decision. Somebody that is competent can act in proxy for a person that is not competent. The second thing is that research must benefit by minimizing harm and risk and maximizing benefits. There is no research that is free of harm. Anybody that says research is free of harm is a lie. There are 5 types of research of harm. It might be physical, psychological, emotional. It can be financial, and I think there's a 5th one. There is a 5th one. I can't remember now. There are all types of harms. 5 types of harm. It can only be minimal. And that's what you do in research by allowing ethics committee to review, so as to ensure that everything is put in place so that it's minimal harm. If you're doing a questionnaire research, that person can use that time to be sleeping or making money. You are harming that person by spending the time that the person has alternative use for. So don't do questionnaire and ask 50 questions when at the end of the day, your research you're going to only use 5. If you're only going to use 5 of that questions for your research, then ask 5, 50, and then put the 45 in the freezer. After wasting somebody's time when he had an alternative use of the time. But as much as possible, you must maximize benefit. Do what it is that has social justice, that is justified social value, so that the people come out well for it. At the minimum, that's one of the beautiful things I like about Ibadan's medical school. When they do their research in the community, they go back to the community and give back their, give back the results so that the people can use the results. You don't do research and then you collect the results, you get your thesis, you graduate from school and then you go away. So what? So what? So that the next set of students coming in 10 years can pick your book and repeat it. No, you must give back in every way to ensure beneficence. Non-maleficence says that at the worst, don't do me harm. It is true many of the research might be things you're just building on and you might not have gotten results, concrete results. But even then, people that are involved, you must do them no harm. They must not be made worse off. They can't, because of your research, be spending their money. So because of your research, you want somebody to come back who has malaria. You know, when you treat malaria, the person should come for a recall visit at day 3 or day 5. But because of your research, you're asking them to come every day. Because of your research, you're spending money, transport money. You ask this person that has malaria to go and take chest X-ray because you want to look at the chest problem associated with malaria. Chest X-ray is not the standard of practice. It is your own interest in research. You now put it in the study person's bill, and then he pays for chest X-ray because you want to do research. That's harm. You're making him spend money. Even that person that is coming every day, whereas he should come once in a week for your review, and you're not compensating for the transport, you are exposing him to harm because there's the possibility of an accident in that place, person traveling up and down. There are many elements of harm, but you must not harm the person, even if you cannot benefit them. And finally, justice makes that uneven distribution of the benefits. This research you are doing, who are the people going to benefit? For example, in Nigeria, I'm doing a study on contraception. We know it's the high-income people that will use contraception for most of the time. But then because you can't go to Victoria Island and be knocking on their door, because their door, they won't open it. And when they open it, there's a dog. But if you go to Ajegule, once you sit where you sit down, 400 of them will come because you have 500 naira transport reimbursement. 500 of them will queue in front of you. You just sit down. Because it's easier for you to recruit in Ajegula, you now go to be recruiting in Ajegula. You don't go to the Victoria Island, where it is the people that will use the contraceptive. That is on even distribution of the benefits, and it's called exploitation. That is why you do not go to jail and go and be recruiting people from the jail, because the study result has no benefit for them. That's why you must not open the doors for people from high-income countries to come and use our people in low-income countries to collect data, then they take the data away. And you that is even collecting the data has no access to the data, that you can't even tell your story. You cannot open the doors for exploitation. And that means benefit and burden of any research must be equally distributed. The Guatemala story is a different one, which the US government also had to apologize for. It was discovered by accident. I met the person that actually discovered that doing an anthropological study. Unlike the Tuskegee, where people that were infected was the one that was recruited and then you followed up. With the Guatemala, they actually infected the persons. They gave them syphilis. Sex workers, prisoners, soldiers, people with poor mental health problems. They actually gave the infection. And then they watched the life progress. 150 plus people died. And it was only in 2005 that they discovered the horrors by a social scientist. I met her who was reviewing the documents, the archive document. They almost fainted. And then Hillary Clinton apologized. So yes, in Nigeria, we have unethical trials research, and you must not be part of it, where you require patients to pay for tests not related to care, where you coerce patients to enroll. You come in front of students, enroll, please put down your lecture, what's it, your numbers. We coerce in so many ways. And worse is when you're a doctor recruiting your patients. The patients will say yes. Even when you tell the story, ask somebody that is not you as a doctor to do the recruitment. Or you enroll people, that one is so common. You'll be enrolling people in a study without their knowledge, especially you medical doctors and dentists, all of you there. You will go and collect their case notes and be collecting their data. You just be collecting their data from their case notes. You didn't tell them, you didn't collect consent for use of their data. Whereas when they gave you that data, it was for their care, not for the research. You didn't collect consent. It's when you collect consent, it's signed, but you don't pay them amounts that are due to them. Anybody coming for your research, you must pay their transports and many other forms of things. Of course, in Nigeria, we had such a study where abuse happened, the Trovan trial. They took advantage of a disaster, like a pandemic. In Nigeria, we used to have meningitis outbreak. 1999, 1997, I was alive. I was here. The meningitis, it happened every year. Meningitis outbreak in the north. This one in Kano was huge. And what happened? They just flew in a Trovan that was never meant for children. Had never been trialed for children. It had not gone through phase 1, phase 2 trials. And then they administered it to these children. Of course, 11 died, paralyzed, deaf. And then when they saw that things, they just took it, parachute left from the US. That was Pfizer. It was a journalist that revealed it. And at the end of the day, it had not been tested. It was not approved. It wasn't even approved in Nigeria. There was no data safety and monitoring board. The monitoring, no follow-up. And then they did something that was horrible. They were recruiting participants in a clean room, about 200 Nigerians. What was the things that made it happen to? Like I said, it was a journalist. They did not have ethics approval. It was undue influence because they'll say if you participate in the trial, they give you that bed space. At a time when there were so many of them and the hospitals could not contain. So it was undue influence. They also were given treatment in the name of treatment. That's what they said they were giving. They didn't tell them they were experimenting that had unproven effect. Of course, people took it. The worst thing was that when they did the comparator, they compared their new one with existing therapy. They now reduced the efficacy of the existing therapy to improve the chance of their own therapy working. And of course, it was double standards. Okay? So they went to court. And the first thing they did, guys, hear me, they propped out an ethics clearance. They went to court boldly, and brought out an ethics clearance and said it was approved. What does this mean? When you have ethics clearance, the liability is to the ethics committee because that ethics clearance is a legal document. Until it was proven that clearance that they collected was not by any ethics committee because there was no ethics committee in Kano at that time. It was one permanent secretary that signed the letter. The minute they told them in court, they now said, let's settle out of court because they know it was over. Get your ethics clearance. It's a legal document. And they went boldly with it. When it was proven that there was no ethics committee, that it was just one individual, the permanent secretary, that signed it, immediately they turned back. Let's go out to negotiate. And that's how they went for negotiation because they know they were done for. Trovan itself is off the market. It was approved for adults, but it was causing problems. Suspended in Europe, and now it's not administered again. So what is it that we learned? That there were weak systems in Nigeria. But now those things have been addressed. I'm going to skip this because of time. All right? Weak things, weak system. Our system is a lot better now. No matter how long abuse has occurred, consequences are serious. Abuse has serious consequences, not only on physical, as you can see with the Kano trial, on mental health also, financial impact. And you don't have a right to use others for the advancement of your career or profits. Data that are derived from research in which human participants are abused are useless. And documented informed consent is superior to verbal consent. We don't do verbal consent in Nigeria. We do informed consent, so they must sign. And that is the gold standard. On that note, I'll say thank you for listening. And I hand over to Kudus. Apologies, I spent time here. And we have 5 more minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. Very quickly, we'll take questions. If we are top of the hour, we'll go to the chat box to continue conversation, the WhatsApp platform. So, any question? Anyone with a question? Okay. Emmanuel, you can unmute. Emmanuel, go ahead. You can unmute.
Okay, thank you very much, Ma. So my question is, you explained that we shouldn't coerce anybody or force people to take our research. I want to ask, does offering maybe incentives or for instance, if I want to do a research in oral health, if I probably give people that attempt to take my questionnaire, if I give them maybe something like toothpaste or so, is that also a form of coercion?
Yes, excellent question. I think I've
Okay.
heard, but please make it very brief questions. And if you have questions, just put it in the chat box so that we can take it very fast. We have 3 more minutes. We'll probably ask for extension of 5 minutes so as to take the questions. Please note that whatever incentive you want to give, you have to write it in your protocol and get ethics approval, because the ethics committee have competency and they're trained to weigh risk and benefits. So they would know which incentive is not coercive, and they can approve. If it's coercive, they will tell you to change whatever it is to one that is not coercive. You cannot of yourself determine what it is that you will give as incentive. There is a place for incentives, but please note that the incentives cannot be coercive. Ethics committee must give approval for that, because they would be able to assess what's coercion or not within the context of the population you want to deal with. Please know that what is coercive for those in Ajekule can definitely not be what is coercive for people in Victoria Land. And therefore, that difference matter in determining what is coercive or not. Next question. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Ma, for the very insightful lectures. My question lies on the pediatric journal. But how do we recognize pediatric journals? And
excellent
more
question.
so on the for the Q1 index journals, I've noticed that the studies they usually prefer are really novel studies or systematic reviews. In the cases where we conduct studies.
No. I'm running because of time. I have your 2 questions. Predator journals, very easy. Just type the name of the journal in your DeepSeek chat and ask, is this a predator journal? It will tell you. However, predator journals are usually very easily recognized. They're not Scopus indexed. Once a journal is not Scopus indexed, let your index be high. I am not saying all non-Scopus index journals are predator journals. You would not find them in what is it called? Places where you have journals listed like Agile, Scopus, PubMed. There's a name for all of this. You will not find them there. Okay, they are always self-publishing. So just Google them. That's the easiest way for me. I can just put it in ChatGPT. Is this a predator journal? It will give you everything that makes it a red flag, that is a predator journal, or to show you everything that makes it clean. But I will never go to look for publications outside the Scopus index. It also affects the Q1. 2, it is not true. Every journal has its focus. If you are not doing clinical trial and you go to New England Journal of Medicine, from the editor's desk, they will throw it out because their focus is there. That's why you must read. Every journal has its focus. So go and read what his focus is and send your journal manuscript to where it is. It ought to be. If your journal, your manuscript is not a clinical trial, don't go to JAMA, don't go to New England Journal of Medicine, because that's what they do. If you are doing if there's something that says I don't do regional, don't go and put it there. There are top journals. Lancet will take epidemiological studies. But Lancet itself will take clinical trials. Lancet Global Health will take epidemiology. So you must understand your journals. Q1 journals are not exclusive. And I can tell you that all of us here that are teaching you are writing Q1 journals. All right. And please don't make an excuse of APC fees. There are journals that I think the APC fees that waiver that you have as low people from low middle income countries makes those in high income countries jealous because they don't have it. You can have waivers. There are many Q1, Q2 journals that waive for you. They just waive. BMC series, they waive. If you're from Nigeria, low middle income, you don't pay APC fees. And there are plenty. I'm sure if I start to count now of the ones I know off my head, they're over 100. BMC alone, BMC series is over 100 in itself. Yeah, I mean Springer Nature. Springer Nature is over 100. It's over 200, so not to talk of others. All right. Yes, next question, Kudus. We have 4 more minutes. If there's any question we don't answer, please take it to the WhatsApp platform.
Okay. Collins.
Okay, thank you very much, ma. My question is for secondary researches where you don't build your data from the scratch, you have to collect an already generated data. How do you get consent from the publishers?
Two things. You have to send to your ethics committee. Your ethics committee will make a decision about what it is. If the collection of your secondary data is such that it is collecting data that is not blinded, you will have to get informed consent. For example, if you're doing your systematic review, you get your all the forms of literature reviews, evidence-based literature reviews, you would have to register with Prospero or Open Science Foundation. That is your way of getting ethics clearance. If you are using existing data that is anonymized, generated from a primary data, please, your ethics committee will give you a waiver of consent because it is anonymized. You do not know who owns the data. If you are, however, collecting data from using data that is not anonymized, which means you have access, you would see who it is that owns, you have to get informed consent. You go back to whoever it is because you already know the person and they have their contacts and you get informed consent to use it. So depending, there's a whole range of secondary data analysis that different types, and depending on which one, your consent might be waived, but it is not for you to determine. You would know what you should do, but the ethics committee will give you clearance on the type of consenting for the study. Over.
Okay, ma, there's a question on the chat box. You mentioned that we need to get consent from patients before we look at their case notes. What if these patients are dead? For example, if one is
Go
doing
and look for the one that is not dead. Go and look for the one that is not dead. You have a sample size. Your sample size says 2050. 200. If this one is dead, the others that are not dead, go and take the one that is there, not dead. Next question.
Yeah, I think that's the last
because
question.
all your patients cannot be dead. And if all of them are dead, go and receive consent for waiver from the ethics committee. It's not you that determines waiver. Write it in your ethics, in your protocol, that all your patients that are using are dead, including people that want to use dead body. But please note that they are proxies. They are, what is it called? Even if they are dead, they would have written. What is this thing that you write?
That's surrogate legal authority.
No, sorry. That they write it in that case note.
Legal authoritative, LAR.
They are next of kin or something. You go to them that I want to use the data of your next of kin. They will give you consent if they will. Okay, we have 1 more minute. 1 more minute. Any question? Otherwise, we'll call it a day. Thanks for being here. What to you, Kudus?
Okay, ma, thank you very much. And I'm sure we've all learned a lot, just like I did. With that, we'll be running up today's session, but we'll have some discussion in-house. So let me just end the live streaming. Just a minute, please.